I remembered that my soul chose to come to Earth. I remembered where I was before I was born.
What made me come back was that I had agreed to do this before I was born.
Why are we here? To learn to love.
I was in a beautiful, beautiful field. The flowers were so vibrant and alive.
And I realized I was looking at none other than Jesus Christ, the Son of God.
I found myself not only forgiving her, there actually, after seeing everything so clearly and seeing why she was the way she was and who she really was on a soul level, after seeing that, there wasn't even a need to forgive her. It was just a big, oh, I get it now.
So if I had committed a loving action, it was like love upon light. A purely loving action was the most wonderful thing that I could ever achieved in my life.
NDEs, or near-death experiences, are stories of those who have briefly crossed the threshold of death but were resuscitated. Testimonies reveal experiences of the realm beyond death. Decades of reports of NDEs from patients and doctors have been collected. Select experiences share esoteric insights into understanding the nature of the life after life and shine a light on the great questions of the human soul.
And I was called to recount for the deeds of my life. And this recounting for the deeds of one's life is not like we would think at all in terms of this life. Because what was important were the choices that I made. And what was more important than just the choices that I made were my motivations and my intents and really the state of my heart in doing any single action. And I realized in this, because I experienced sort of in a holographic awareness that was rather instantaneous, how every action that one takes is like a stone cast in the water, and if it's loving, that stone, is cast in the water, and the loving action goes out and touches the first person that it's intended for, and then it touches another person, and then it touches another person, because that person interacts with other people, and so on and so on. And every action has a reverberating effect upon every single one of us on the face of this planet. So if I had committed a loving action, it was like love upon light. A purely loving action was the most wonderful thing that I could ever achieved in my life. This had more meaning than to have been a Rockefeller or President of the United States, or to have been a great scientist and to have invented something just incredible. If I had committed a truly pure and loving action, it had reverberated throughout the stuff of every individual on that planet, and I felt that action reverberating through them and through myself. And I felt it in a way that is beyond what we can even feel ourselves on this plane of existence. So the significance of one's actions totally changed. What was not important was anything that I had, owned or known intellectual, there's a sense of intellectual pride, not that knowledge is bad, knowledge is good, but what was important was the purity and the motivation of every action. And I recall the most important of my actions is an instant I would never have recalled except for the near-death experience. And that's that many years ago. I had worked every summer as a volunteer with retarded children. There was a day camp that went on, and I spent all summer going every day, 8 hours a day, to this day camp. And there was a child one time. It wasn't as if I were being rewarded for taking good actions, like writing down actions. Well, I have done this good and that good and that good. No, what was important was, again, the motivation and the purity and the sincerity of my acts. And I had taken a child aside on a very hot day, and this was not a charming or a particularly lovable child. But I wanted this child to feel loved. I wanted this child to feel really the love of God that brought him into existence and that brought us all into existence. And I took him aside, although I wasn't religiously motivated, formally. I just wanted him to feel love. Took him aside and sang to him and gave him something to drink and just spend some time with him. And he was very agitated, but just wanted him to feel that love. And that was the greatest of all actions. And that filled me with just unspeakable and incomprehensible joy. And it was not an action that anyone noticed. And it was not an action that I even recalled. And it was not an action that I had done with any thought of reward. It was simply an action motivated by love, by selfless love. And this had great meaning.
And God and I stood together, and God was on my right, and heaven was behind us. And I was very aware that heaven was a planet. And God and I stood together. And as we're looking out in front of us at the galaxy and all of the stars in front of us, I hear in my left ear, it was a vintage sounding projector, and it sounded like a movie was starting. And as soon as I heard the projector going in my left ear, I could see the stars that were just stars at one time all of a sudden lined up like a curtain, and the curtain opened slowly to the right, and I heard 3, 2, 1, and it was a life review of McKenzie on the projector screen. So it was God and I in a big movie theater in the galaxy. And that's when my life review began. And literally for me, the life review was everything from that day that I was born up until that day that I had taken my last breath and I died. And in this life review, I was shown everything from things like losing a tooth, losing my first tooth, graduating from high school, any kind of awards that I had won in athletics or cheerleading, all of these things that were great accomplishments, and they were really happy times, but they were significant things that man deems as significant, if you will, accomplishments. And as I'm watching all of these events unfold in chronological order, I'm actually reliving the event in that very moment as if it had just happened the first time. As we're observing it, I'm living it. And we finally get to the end on the day that I died. And the movie screen turned off. And then all of a sudden, in front of me, I knew to look down, and it was this telepathic communication. And as I had the knowing I needed to look down, appear in front of me a pair of eyeglasses. And I've never worn glasses before, and God said to put them on. And I didn't know how I was going to put these glasses on, because I have to understand these glasses weren't normal pair of glasses that you would find here on Earth. These were the size of a vehicle. And I'm thinking to myself, how am I going to put these glasses on? I just don't even know. And I remember as soon as I had the thought of how am I going to do this, it didn't even matter. My hands were already drawing the glasses near to put them on my face. And by the time that I got them to my face, it wasn't even a problem. They fit perfectly. And I could see. I could really see. And then God said, now look. And as soon as he said, now look, again, I heard that vintage movie projector in my left ear. 3, 2, 1, the curtain opened again, life review of Erica McKenzie. So this was my second life review. And this time, I didn't see at all what I had seen the first time in the life review. This time I could see. And everything that I saw in this life review, starting with the day that I was born until that day that I had died, was not at all what I had seen before. This time these were things that were important to God, not important to man. And they were not at all those accomplishments that I talked about before. These were things like love and acts of kindness, things I couldn't even remember that I had done. Befriending someone that everybody was mean to, or, you know, a neglected an animal, and I helped an animal, or giving money to a homeless person when I didn't really have money to give. Helping someone, you know, across the street, an elderly person. Every single action, word, thought, feeling was all about love. And we lived all of those series of events just like the first time, like it was happening for that very first time. I lived it again, and I felt so much unconditional love from God as we're reliving this series of events together. And we got to the day again that I died, and the life review was over. And as soon as the life review was over, I remember knowing to look up. And so I looked up, and this was the only time that I was able to see God in a physical form at all. And what it was from his shoulder down to his fingertips. And his arm was bigger than a semi-truck. And I remember him making the motion to look up like this, and that's what he did with his arm. And I looked as high as the highest stars, and I could barely see anymore. It was so high up in the air. And I watched, and I looked in the palm of his hand, and in the palm of his hand appeared a rock, a single, large, huge boulder, if you will, rock. And God and I watched together, and I watched him let loose the rock. And the rock was falling, and it was falling for such a long time. It seemed like just forever. And we're watching this rock fall together, and I hear him say, I am the rock. I am the light. And when he said, I am the light, the rock was glowing. It was the most incredible, powerful light. It was so brilliant, in fact, almost blinding, but yet I was able to keep watching it. And as the rock came right in front of us, and it's still falling, in front of me appeared the largest body of water, larger than the largest ocean, if you can imagine. I couldn't even see the borders outstretched all around me. And we watched this rock fall, and it fell into the ocean, and it made one single ripple, just one. And we watched that single ripple grow together, and that single ripple, it grew and it grew and it grew until you couldn't even see the borders of that ripple anymore. And God said to me, you are the rock. You are the light. You are the ripple that affects mankind. And I knew in that very moment, with the 2 life reviews, what that meant. And it wasn't about just me, Erica. It was about each and every one of us being that very rock when we're here on this journey, this earthly journey as humans, that we affect each and every person, even if we never meet them, just like that rock did in that water and the rippling effect. And I understood what that meant.
I was always real fortunate. I came from a wonderful home, had a wonderful childhood. My parents loved me desperately. And their love, you just, compared to this woman, you can't even compare it. When she came, she stood next to me, and she extended her hand outward, and she said, look there. And when I turned my head, I saw from the moment I was born, and I watched every second of my life from the moment I was born until I died. And it wasn't just seeing it, I lived it again, exactly the way I felt it the first time, but with a new sense of kind of intellectual understanding about how I could have done it different, what might have been better, and other things that I cared little about, that I didn't think made an impression on anybody's life at all, were very significant. And probably the most important was when I worked at a convalescent hospital in high school after school. And I used to give a lady graham crackers and milk before I'd leave the shift. And I had no idea how much I had changed her life, how grateful, how appreciative she was. And I thought it was so insignificant back at that time in the 11th grade, but it wasn't. It was like every spirit looking down and saying, thank you for doing this. This woman had nobody. No one loved her.
But then something spectacular happened. Something amazing happened. I got the chance to see what I call the unsung hero. I got a chance to see doctors, nurses, teachers, housewives, vets, all those people doing deeds that no one else knew about. No one else knew what was going on. Just they were doing their job and doing the right thing because it is the right thing to do. Over and over in my consciousness, I kept feeling, you do the right thing because it is the right thing to do. Ask yourself that. Ask yourself that. Doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do. Because sometimes what I saw on the other side, I saw myself, I don't want to use the word failing, but just not shining. Just not shining.
Our small actions reverberate throughout the world. Possessions and accomplishments are not a measure of true contribution. Rather, it is acts of kindness and love, especially when done with sincere intent. Great positions of influence are of little value in comparison to quiet, simple, and loving deeds. How is it that the ripples of small acts of loving kindness are greater than spectacular inventions? Perhaps the feeling of being loved has the greatest eternal impact. In our next episode, we explore the experiences of those who had met family and pets in the life beyond death.